Hey gang, and welcome back. These videos are brought to you by Card Conduit, the best place to sell your unused collection fast and easily. 401 Games, Canada's top shop for all your hobby and TCG needs. Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest decks. Moxfield, the easiest way to store and share your deck lists. And Foil Armor, flatten your foils fast. Buckle up gang, cause I am congested, but we're gonna get through this together. Today, Mark wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Plains. Mika plays a tap Mystic Sanctuary. Pat draws and plays a Swamp. Max's turn has him playing a tap Sacred Foundry. Mark draws, plays a Plains, and casts Brigone. Mika plays a Lava Glide Pathway and pays 2 for Dimir Signet. Pat's got an island and casts Arcane Signet. Max draws, playing a Plains, and casts Batterbone. Mark plays a Pit of Offering, but with nothing to exile, and then casts Wing It on Brigone. She gets a flying counter and a +1/+1 counter, and he then swings his commander at Max for 5. Max takes the hit, and Mark passes. Mika's got a Cabal Coffers, and casts Talisman of Indulgence. Pat plays a Choked Estuary, and is then able to cast a Palladium Mirror. Max draws, swinging Batterbone at Mika, dealing 1. He then casts Sword of the Anime, and passes. Mark's got a Plains, and casts Feather of Flight on Brigone. She gets another counter, and Mark then sends her at Mika for 5. After that, Mark passes. Mika draws and plays a Polluted Delta, cracking it and losing 1 to lose 2 more for an untapped Steam Vents. He then casts Kefka, with each player discarding a card. This has Mika drawing 2 cards from the different types, and he passes after that. Pat's got a tap Mistvault Bridge, and then casts the Cyber Controller, putting 3 into the X. He only gets 1 Cyberman from it though, and has to pass. Max draws and plays a tap Spinerock Knoll, hiding away a card. He then moves the Sword of the Animist onto his Germ token with Batterbone. He swings the Germ at Mark, and Mark decides to be nice and let it go through. Max gets a land from the Sword of the Anime trigger, and then passes after it connects. During the end step, Mark taps Brigone to draw a card and remove a counter. Mark plays a Crystal Grotto, and then casts Lizelle. He then taps Brigone again to draw a card, and follows it up with Light the Way to put 4 more counters onto her and untap her. Going to combat, Mark then hits Pat for 7 with his commander and passes. Mika's got a Swamp and casts a Cryptcaller Chariot. He then swings Kefka at Max, and everyone discards again. This has Mika drawing 4 off the trigger and making a zombie token, and Max then takes the 4. Moving to his end step, Mika has to discard down to hand size and makes another zombie token. Pat's main phase has him casting Phyrexian Scriptures. He then plays Thoughtcast to draw 2, and follows it up by casting Cyberman Patrol. Going to combat, Pat then hits Mika for 3 with his Cyberman, and passes. Max's turn has him casting Dragoon's Lance, and a Monk's Fist. Max then sends his Germ token at Mika for 2, and gets a land before connecting. He passes, with Mark once more drawing a card off of Brigone during the end step. Mark draws, playing at a Reliquary Tower, and casts Sword of Feast and Famine. He equips the sword into Brigone, and sends her at Max. Max takes the hit and discards a card, while Mark gets to untap his lands. After combat, Mark then casts Solemn Simulacrum, going to find a basic, and passes. Mika draws and sends Kefka at Pat and 2 zombies at Max. Mika draws 4 off the Kefka on attack trigger from everyone discarding, and Pat takes it while Max blocks 2 zombies with a hero token and a germ token. Mika then plays an Urborg, and he casts Singularity Rupture, and holds priority to this, casting Essence Flux on Kefka. Kefka comes back immediately, with everyone discarding again, and Mika drawing 3. Mark then responds to the Singularity Rupture, tapping Brigone to draw a card, and all creatures are then destroyed. Mika also gets to mill each of his opponents with the Rupture, and then continues by casting Helm of the Host and passing. Pat just draws, ticks up his Phyrexian Scriptures, and casts a Midnight Clock. Max's turn has him playing a Cactus Preserve, and then brings out and passes. Mark's got a Plains and recasts Brigone. He then moves the Sword of Feast and Famine onto her and passes. Mika plays a Command Tower, and then casts Kefka Dancing Mad. He equips him with the Helm of the Host, and announces he'll go to combat, but Pat responds before leaving the main phase with a Tyrant's Scorn to bounce Kefka. Mika then passes turn. Pat adds the final lore counter onto the Phyrexian Scriptures, exiling each opponent's graveyards. He doesn't have a land drop though, and just has to pass. Max draws, plays a mountain, and activates his Cactus Preserve. He then moves the Sword of the Anime onto Sephiroth, and goes to combat. He puts a cell counter onto the Preserve and swings both creatures at Mika. Max gets to find a Plains off the Sword of the Anime on attack trigger, and Mika then takes 15. Max then passes turn. Mark's got a Monastery Mentor in his main phase, and he casts Flare of Faith on Brigone. She gets +3/+3 and Indestructible, plus Mark gets to make a Monk token. He then swings his Commander at Mika. Mika takes the hit, discarding a card, and Mark gets to untap his lands. He ships it after that. Mika's got an island for turn, and recasts Kefka. Max is empty-handed, so Mika only gets to draw 2. Mika then casts a Displacer Kitten, and follows it up by casting Faithless Looting, blinking Kefka. With the blink targeting, Mark responds with Fight as 1 on Brigone, and Mark and Max are then empty-handed, so once more Kefka only draws 2. After that, Mika passes, and Pat activates the Midnight Clock on the end step to add a counter. Pat draws and casts Ixidor in his main phase, and passing. Maximus equips his Dragoon's lands onto Sephiroth, and swings him at Mika. He puts a cell counter onto Sephiroth, and Mika responds with an Infernal Grasp to destroy Sephiroth and loses 2. After combat, Max casts Red Mage's Rapier, and passes. And once more, Mark activates Brigone to draw a card. On Mark's upkeep, Pat's Midnight Clock goes off, and he shuffles his hand and graveyard into his library, and then draws 7, and he uses the blue he floated off the clock to help cast Visions of Beyond, drawing a card. Mark then draws for turn, and he casts Knight of the White Orchid in his main phase, going to find a Plains. He then swings his Monastery Mentor, 2 monks, and Brigone at Mika. Mika blocks the monk tokens and the Mentor, but can't stop Brigone and gets taken out. After that, Mark passes turn. Pat's got an island and casts Unctus. He then hits Max with Ixidor and passes. Max's turn has him playing a Rugged Prairie, and he equips the Sword of the Animist and Batterbone to his hero token. He then sends the hero at Pat, who blocks with Unctus. Max still gets a land though from attacking, and gains 3 life. He then passes, and during the end step, Mark once more draws a card off of Brigone. Mark's got a Plains, and casts an Akroan Skyguard. He then hits Pat with Brigone, and passes. Pat's got an island, and pays 2 life to make Ixidor an artifact creature, and Pat then swings both of his creatures at Max, looting a card from Unctus. Max then blocks Unctus with his hero token, and before damage, Pat flashes in Research Thief, and then draws off of Ixidor connecting. After that, Pat passes. Max draws and recasts Sephiroth, and sends the hero token at Pat. Max fails to find a basic, and Pat then takes the hit, and Max passes. Mark draws and plays out a Plains, swinging Brigone at Pat and the Akroan Skyguard at Max. Neither of them can block well, so they just take their hits, and Mark passes. Pat once more draws, plays an island, and makes Ixidor an artifact creature with Unctus. He then swings Ixidor and Unctus at Max, and the Research Thief at Mark. Max promises to only block Unctus, so Pat can draw. This is Pat looting twice, and drawing 2 cards. And his second main phase has him casting Cybermen Patrol again, and then a Solemn Simulacrum. He ships it after that. Max plays a Bonder's Enclave and moves Dragoon's Lance onto Sephiroth. He then plays a Hex Gold Halberd and activates the Cactus Preserve and goes to combat. Max swings the Preserve and the hero token at Pat, and Sephiroth at Mark. The Solemn Simulacrum and Cyberman Patrol chump, while Mark takes 8 from Sephiroth. Max in turn also gains 11 life, and after combat, Max activates Spine Rock Knoll, casting Bladehold Warwhip. Mark's turn has him casting a tapped Marble Diamond, and he swings Brigone at Pat. Pat takes the hit, and Mark then passes. Pat draws and plays a Swamp, and makes Ixidor an artifact again. He then swings Ixidor at Mark, and the Research Thief at Max, and loots twice. They each take their hit for 4, with Pat drawing 2, and Pat then passes turn. Max draws and activates the Bonder's Enclave to draw again, and he goes to combat. He puts a cell counter onto the Rebel, and then swings everything at Pat. This is Pat casting the Tyrant Scorn, bouncing Sephiroth, and then Peel from Reality to bounce the hero token and Ixidor. Pat then chumps the Double Striker with Unctus, but still takes 7. In his second main phase, Max then recasts Sephiroth. Mark's turn has him casting Stave Off and targets Brigone with it to give her protection from red and a +1/+1 counter. He then swings his commander at Max. And before damage, he then casts Lauren's Escape on Brigone, giving her another counter and scrying. He then taps Brigone to draw a card to hopefully find another pump, but can't, and Max takes 5. Mark then plays Kelith and passes. Pat's turn has him casting the Cyber Controller again, putting 5 into the X. But he hits no creatures though, and has to pass. During the end step, Max returns Skyblade's Boon to his hand, and we move to his turn. Max draws, moving the Dragoon's Lance onto Sephiroth, and then equips a Batterbone and the Red Mage's Rapier to the Warwhipped Rebel token. He then casts the Skyblade's Boon onto the Rebel, and swings it at Pat and his 2 other creatures at Mark. Pat can't block enough and gets taken out, and Mark chumps Sephiroth as the Crow and Skyguard, but takes 7. After that, Max equips the Monk's Fist and Sword of the Animist onto the Warwhip Rebel token, and he passes after that. Mark draws Plane of Planes and swings Brigone at Max. Before moving to blocks, he activates her to draw a card. He doesn't rip anything off the top though, so Max blocks with his Rebel token. Mark then passes turn. Max's turn has him drawing and activating the Cactus Preserve. He then swings it at Mark, who, without enough blockers, gets taken out and Max wins the game. Game review time. So I'm progressively getting more and more chesty. And yeah, this is a long game, mostly because of the fact that at every time that Kefka attacked or entered, the table spent like 10 minutes discussing what cards to discard to minimize what Mika's able to get. Unfortunately, even with all the discussions, he still seemed to be pulling ahead with the amount of cards that he was drawing. Outside of that, we had a lot of very combat-focused decks with Sephiroth and Brigone. I thought Brigone was pretty cool, especially the fact that she's able to remove a counter after swinging to try and hopefully find a pump spell. And Sephiroth just did what it wants to do, which is put cell counters on stuff and swing with equipment.
This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.